The algorithm told Camille that Lucas Kyle and Patrick Kennedy had been neutralized. Then, almost immediately, Kennedy's voice came through the radio from Silo 17. That alone was a huge contradiction. But after episode 8, we can go further. Because Lucas and Kennedy didn't simply survive an attack that was supposed to kill them. They reached Silo 17, got inside, and started doing exactly what the algorithm was trying to prevent. Lucas was injured, Kennedy was fine, and both men made it far enough to help the survivors of Silo 17 figure out how the safeguard had been stopped. So the question has changed. Why did the system fail to kill them? And I think the answer may tell us something much bigger about what the algorithm can actually control. Let's go back to the decision that sent them outside. Juliet needed information from Silo 17. Specifically, she needed to understand how that silo had survived long enough for Solo and the children to still be alive. The algorithm rejected her first choices for the mission. Then Juliet suggested Lucas and Kennedy. That decision was almost suspiciously easy. The algorithm agreed, but once Juliet left, it told Camille that the two men would never make it to 17. That detail matters because the algorithm wasn't merely predicting that the mission was dangerous, it was confident. Lucas and Kennedy were considered risks to Silo 18, and the algorithm had apparently decided that sending them outside would solve the problem. Then the mission began. They left early. They crossed the space between the silos, and as they approached Silo 17, something attacked them. We heard gunfire. Their radio went down. Camille was told they had been neutralized. Episode 8 shows us what happened next. Kennedy survived. Lucas survived, although a shot went through the radio in his suit and into his shoulder. And they reached Silo 17. That means the attack accomplished one very specific thing. It injured Lucas and cut communication. It did not eliminate either man. That distinction could be extremely important, because if the algorithm had complete control over the defenses outside the silos, why stop there? Why leave two people alive who had just been sent on a mission to discover how Silo 17 defeated the safeguard? There are a few possibilities. The simplest is that the attack was never as precise as we assumed. The drones may have been sent to stop them, but the system couldn't guarantee a kill. That would make the algorithm powerful, but still limited, and we've already seen evidence that its information isn't perfect. Silo 17 has been disconnected for a very long time. The power situation is different. Its internal systems are damaged. Its surveillance is clearly not operating in the same way as Silo 18. That creates a blind spot, and that blind spot may be the reason Lucas and Kennedy survived. Think about what happens once they reach the entrance. They aren't immediately killed. They're confronted by the survivors. They are allowed inside. And Jimmy, the person we've known as Solo, helps Lucas. That is where the algorithm's problem becomes much bigger. The system had successfully separated Silo 18 from Silo 17 for years. Then Juliet broke that separation. She went to Silo 17, she came back. And now Lucas and Kennedy have gone there too. The more people move between silos, the harder it becomes for the system to control what information crosses that boundary. That is probably why Lucas was such a dangerous choice. He already knew too much. He had seen things that ordinary citizens were never supposed to see. He had learned about the safeguard. He had discovered that Juliet's journey outside didn't end the way everyone had been told it would. And now he had access to a silo that had apparently survived a safeguard event. That's a nightmare scenario for whoever controls the system. Because Silo 17 isn't just another silo. It's evidence. The people inside have evidence that the rules can be broken. The safeguard can be interrupted. A silo can survive. And now Lucas is there to investigate exactly how that happened. That is why I think the biggest clue in episode 8 isn't actually Lucas getting shot. It's what happens after he enters Silo 17. The system loses its ability to dictate the story. In Silo 18, the algorithm can tell Camille that Lucas and Kennedy are dead. Inside Silo 17, Lucas can see the evidence for himself, and Kennedy can help him investigate it. That is a very different kind of threat, because once people can compare what they were told with what actually happened, the entire system becomes harder to maintain. And episode 8 gives us another reason to think Silo 17 may be unusually difficult for the algorithm to monitor. The algorithm seems to know an enormous amount about Silo 18. It can predict behavior. It can calculate survival outcomes. It can manipulate Camille. It can control information. But when it comes to Silo 17, things get much less certain. There are fan discussions around exactly this point. Why does the system appear to have such limited visibility into a silo that still has people alive inside it? That question becomes even more interesting when you remember that Silo 17 has been effectively cut off. The infrastructure is damaged. The population is gone. The internal power systems aren't functioning normally. The cameras aren't giving the algorithm the same level of information it gets inside Silo 18. And Solo has been living there for years without the system directly managing his life. That suggests something important. The algorithm may control the silos through infrastructure rather than possessing unlimited awareness of everything happening inside them. If that's true, then the outside defense system may also have limits. The algorithm can issue an instruction. It can predict what should happen. It can trigger systems. But that doesn't necessarily mean it can see every movement of two people walking across the surface in real time. And that would explain why its prediction failed. It expected the defense system to kill them. The defense system attacked. Lukas and Kennedy survived anyway. That is a much more interesting explanation than simply saying they had plot armor, because it gives us a new weakness in the system. The algorithm can be wrong. And if the algorithm can be wrong about two people standing outside a silo, it can potentially be wrong about something much bigger. It can be wrong about Silo 17. It can be wrong about Juliet. And it can be wrong about the possibility of stopping the safeguard. There is another detail from episode 8 that makes this even more interesting. Lukas doesn't just survive. He arrives in Silo 17 at exactly the place where the biggest secret of the entire season is waiting for him. The safeguard was stopped there, and Kennedy eventually discovers how. Jimmy's mother had sealed herself inside the section containing the poison line, sacrificing herself to prevent the gas from spreading through the silo. That discovery gives Silo 18 something the algorithm desperately wanted them to believe was impossible. A method. There is now physical evidence that the safeguard can be interrupted. The algorithm had already told Camille that the safeguard was not preventable. It had described Silo 17's survival as temporary. But that explanation becomes much harder to accept once Kennedy discovers what actually happened. Someone inside Silo 17 physically interfered with the system, and it worked. At least for long enough to save the people who remained. That means Lukas and Kennedy surviving the trip isn't an isolated mistake. Their survival puts them in the exact location where the system's biggest claim is being challenged. That feels deliberate. And it raises another possibility. Maybe the algorithm didn't need Lukas and Kennedy dead. Maybe it only needed them separated from Silo 18. Look at what the attack accomplished. Lukas's radio is damaged. Their communication was interrupted. Silo 18 believed they were dead. For a short period, that was enough. Juliet was about to make a completely different decision because she believed the mission had failed. Then Kennedy's transmission came through, and that transmission stopped Juliet from destroying Judicial. So the radio itself becomes important. The system may have been trying to control the information reaching Juliet, while the physical attack was simply the mechanism used to cut off communication. If that was the objective, the attack actually worked for a while. The mistake was allowing Kennedy and Lukas to survive long enough to reconnect. And that is where I think the algorithm's biggest weakness may be hiding. It is extremely good at controlling people who depend on its information. It has a much harder time controlling people who have direct evidence. Lukas is dangerous because he has direct evidence. Juliet is dangerous for the same reason. Solo is dangerous because he has lived through something the system can't easily explain. And now Kennedy has become dangerous because he has physically inspected the evidence inside Silo 17. These people don't need to believe the algorithm's version of events. They can compare it against what they see. That is a serious problem. Because the entire Silo system depends on isolation. The people in Silo 18 are supposed to believe their silo is the only reality they know. The outside is supposed to be deadly. Other silos are supposed to be inaccessible. The past is supposed to stay buried. And information is supposed to move in one direction. But Juliet broke that. Then Lukas broke it again. Now Kennedy has done it. And the survivors of Silo 17 are no longer just mysterious children living in an abandoned silo. They are witnesses. They know that the official story doesn't explain what happened. They know their parents didn't simply die because they stepped outside. They have survived a safeguard failure, and they now have people from Silo 18 who can carry that information home. That is why I don't think the question should simply be, why didn't the algorithm kill Lukas and Kennedy? The better question is, what does their survival prove about the algorithm? And right now, it proves that the system's control has boundaries. Those boundaries may be technological, they may be geographic, they may be connected to Silo 17's damaged infrastructure, Or there may be another layer we haven't seen yet. But something prevented the system from finishing the job. There is also one possibility I would keep an eye on. The algorithm may have deliberately allowed the mission to continue because it believed the outcome would still favor it. Remember, the system approved Lukas and Kennedy despite knowing they were dangerous. If the algorithm is calculating probabilities rather than simply issuing commands, then sending them to Silo 17 could have been a calculated risk. Maybe it expected them to die. Maybe it expected them to discover something that would not matter. Maybe it knew the safeguard could be stopped temporarily and believed Silo 18 would eventually fail anyway. If that's the case, then Lukas and Kennedy surviving doesn't necessarily mean the algorithm lost. It means we don't yet know what game it is playing. And there is one detail that makes me skeptical of the idea that the algorithm planned every part of this perfectly. It was caught making a claim that turned out to be false. It told Camille that Lukas and Kennedy had been neutralized. They hadn't. That's important. Because we've spent a lot of time treating the algorithm almost like an all-knowing intelligence. Episode 8 gives us a reason to question that assumption. It may be extraordinarily good at prediction. It may have access to huge amounts of information. It may control systems that ordinary people can't even see. But prediction isn't the same as certainty. And Silo has always been interested in what happens when somebody does something the system didn't account for. Juliet did it, Solo did it, Lukas did it. Now Kennedy has done it. The pattern is becoming harder to ignore. The system works best when everyone follows the information it gives them. The moment someone crosses a boundary and checks the evidence personally, the system's story starts falling apart. That could be the real reason Lukas and Kennedy had to reach Silo 17. The show needed them to discover the one thing the algorithm couldn't simply explain away. Proof that the safeguard had been stopped before. Proof that people survived. And proof that the rules governing the silos are not as absolute as everyone was told. So, I think the algorithm's failure to kill Lukas and Kennedy may end up being one of the most important mistakes it has made. Because Lukas went into Silo 17 looking for an answer. Kennedy went with him. And they found something much more dangerous than a blueprint. They found evidence that the system can fail. Now the question is whether Silo 18 can use that evidence before the algorithm gets another chance to close the gap. And after episode 8, that may be the most dangerous thing about Lukas being alive.